August 2025 was always the deadline. Nostradamus knew what would begin. As we step into August 2025, a strange energy hangs in the air. It's subtle but undeniable, like the quiet before a storm, or the pressure before a tectonic shift. Politics are unraveling. Nature is roaring louder. Technology is accelerating past our ability to contain it. Something is stirring, and many are beginning to ask, is this just another turbulent year, or the moment when everything changes? Centuries ago, a man gazed into the stars and wrote of a time like this. His name was Michel de Nostradamus, better known as Nostradamus, and his cryptic quatrains have echoed through time with eerie resonance. Dismissed by some, revered by others, his words now feel less like distant poetry and more like a mirror held up to our present. Was August 2025 the moment he saw coming? In this journey, we won't chase fear or superstition, but meaning. We'll explore the patterns, the prophecies, and the historical pulse that points to August not just as a month but as a threshold, one that demands not only awareness but transformation. Welcome to the crossroads. Let's begin. Number 1. The tension of August 2025. There is a quiet tension threading through August 2025, something many people can feel, even if they can't quite name it. It's not just the weather turning strange or the news feeling chaotic, though those things are certainly part of it. There's a deeper current running beneath the surface of everyday life right now. Conversations, whether over dinner tables or on global stages, seem marked by an unspoken urgency. Events feel disconnected, yet somehow eerily timed. Technology is racing forward, politics are more volatile than ever, and nature is lashing out with increasing unpredictability. To some, this is simply the turbulence of modern life, but for others, it feels like something more, like a moment that was always meant to arrive, and perhaps it was. What if the unrest and uncertainty we're witnessing weren't just random threads in the fabric of our time, but signals of a larger pattern, one that has been long foreseen? Not by today's scientists or sociologists, but by a man who walked the earth nearly 5 centuries ago, Michel de Nostradamus, more famously known as Nostradamus. Often reduced to a caricature or myth, Nostradamus was, in truth, a deeply learned man of the Renaissance, a physician trained to heal, an astrologer who studied the stars, and a mystic who dared to peer beyond the veil of his own time. Through his cryptic quatrains, short, poetic prophecies wrapped in metaphor, he left behind a body of work that continues to perplex and provoke, not only because of what they suggest, but because of when they might come to pass. Now, as we stand at the threshold of August 2025, those once distant words are being re-examined with fresh urgency. Scholars, thinkers, and even skeptics are noticing uncanny parallels between his prophecies and the complex, unsettling world we find ourselves in today. The signs: rising global instability, environmental breakdowns, social fragmentation, and rapid shifts in technology are not isolated. They seem to point toward a convergence, a moment in time when many threads come together. For some, this looks like the climax of a long brewing story. For others, it's the start of something entirely new. Either way, it feels as if we're crossing an invisible threshold, one that Nostradamus may have glimpsed centuries ago. What makes this even more compelling is not a belief in fate or fear, but a recognition that history is shaped not only by cause and effect, but also by meaning. Nostradamus didn't write his visions as entertainment or vague superstition. He wrote them to communicate with a future he could barely imagine, and now that future is our present. Whether you're drawn to prophecy or skeptical of it, the feeling that something momentous is unfolding cannot be easily dismissed. This is not about predicting doom, but about waking up to the rhythms of history and the signs that surround us. Some moments press against the edges of ordinary time. They're charged, alive, and deeply consequential. August 2025 may be such a moment. So take a breath, look around, and ask yourself with honesty, beneath the noise, beneath the headlines, can you feel it too? Number 2. Who was Nostradamus and why his writings matter now? To understand why so many eyes are turning to Nostradamus in August 2025, we need to look beyond the myth and ask, who was this man, really? And why does his voice seem to echo so loudly right now? Michel de Nostradamus, born in 1503 in the south of France, wasn't some cloaked fortune-teller lost in fantasy. He was a man of his era, deeply educated in medicine, astronomy, and classical knowledge, but also someone who felt the hidden pulse of time itself. He lived through plagues, wars, and religious conflict, and while others were focused on survival, he was watching the skies, the seasons, the rhythms of human behavior. He began to sense patterns in the chaos, cycles that repeated not just in history but in the stars above. This wasn't guesswork, it was a kind of quiet listening to the language of time. Rather than writing formal predictions, Nostradamus encoded his insights in poetic quatrains, short, 4-line verses layered with symbols, references, and riddles that could slip past censorship in an age when speaking too clearly could cost you your life. His most famous collection, Les Prophecies, published in 1555, grouped these verses into what he called centuries. A term that wasn't just numerical, it was metaphorical, perhaps pointing to eras or epochs of change. So why all the mystery? Why didn't he just say what he meant? Because he couldn't not safely, and not in a way that would last. He needed to speak across centuries to a future reader, someone like you, who would live in a time when the symbols could finally be matched to real events. And here's where it becomes startling. Nostradamus didn't just refer to disasters or conflicts. He used planetary alignments, eclipses, and astronomical codes to signal when his visions would unfold. What if, hidden in those verses, is not just a story of what might happen, but a calendar of when transformation would come? August 2025 is now under a microscope, not just because the world feels unstable, but because certain patterns Nostradamus pointed to, celestial, political, even climatic, seem to be aligning again. Are we living through one of those cycles he saw coming? Could it be that his riddles, when matched with today's events, become far less vague? Of course, many have dismissed Nostradamus over the years as too abstract, too open to interpretation. But the deeper question is this: what if the ambiguity wasn't a flaw but a feature? What if he designed his work to only make sense to those willing to look closely, to read the signs around them, and to question the flow of history as it unfolds? As more researchers revisit his work with fresh insight, applying astrology, numerology, and geopolitical analysis, they're discovering eerie connections to the present day. But this isn't about fearing prophecy. It's about waking up to a bigger picture, recognizing that humanity moves in cycles, and perhaps learning how to prepare ourselves for change instead of being caught off guard. So, ask yourself this: what if we are not waiting for the future he predicted, but are already standing in it? And here lies the deeper lesson. Whether or not you believe in prophecy, Nostradamus reminds us to pay attention to the sky, to the patterns in history, and to the quiet signals that something is shifting. His work invites us not just to wonder about what's coming, but to engage with the present more fully, to listen with new ears, and to act with awareness. If you feel something stirring this August, you're not alone, and perhaps, in ways still unfolding, this moment was always meant to be a turning point. Number 3. The 26-year countdown. Some moments in history arrive with a crash, loud, dramatic, and impossible to ignore, but others, like those described by Nostradamus, unfold quietly over time, ticking away like a hidden clock beneath the surface of world events. One of his most mysterious and debated verses, known as Quatrain 1072, reads, "In the year 1999 and 7 months, from the sky shall come a great king of terror to bring back to life the great king of the Mongols. Before and after, Mars shall reign happily." At first glance, this prophecy seemed to point directly to a catastrophic event in July of 1999, and when that month passed without an obvious disaster, many dismissed it as just another failed prediction. But what if the prophecy wasn't about one explosive moment? What if it was about a much longer cycle, one that began in silence and has been unfolding ever since? Today, many researchers and interpreters believe July of 1999 wasn't the end, but the beginning, the trigger point of a 26-year countdown, one that leads straight to August of 2025. So let's pause and ask ourselves, what if this countdown has been quietly shaping our world all along? To understand why 26 years may be significant, we need to consider how Nostradamus viewed time, not as a straight line, but as a series of cycles, guided by the movements of the planets. He wasn't just a poet or seer, he was deeply informed by astrology, especially the cycles of Saturn, which in ancient traditions is the planet linked to karma, time, and the breaking down of old structures. A full Saturn cycle takes about 29.5 years, and along the way it forms powerful geometric relationships, conjunctions, oppositions, squares that mark times of stress, challenge, and ultimately transformation. From 1999 to 2025, there have been several of these alignments, not only involving Saturn but also Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune planets that are often connected with upheaval, rebirth, and the rise of hidden forces. When we overlay these celestial cycles with recent history, we begin to see a chilling pattern emerge. Let's look at the timeline. In 1999, Vladimir Putin emerged on the global stage, and a new era of political power began to rise. By 2001, the world was shaken by the September 11th attacks, altering geopolitics forever. In 2008, the global financial crisis disrupted economies and exposed deep cracks in the systems we trust. Then came 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic changed the way we live, connect, and govern. From 2022 through 2024, we've faced rising climate instability, resource scarcity, and disruptive advances in artificial intelligence and technology. These events don't seem random anymore. They appear to be part of a connected arc, moving in rhythm, like dominoes falling in a carefully timed sequence. Could this be the cycle Nostradamus warned us about? Could the King of Terror be symbolic, a force that was unleashed in 1999 and has been reshaping the world ever since, slowly but surely? Now, as August of 2025 draws near, many astrologers, historians, and thinkers believe we're approaching the final stage of this 26-year journey, a culmination, a convergence point where systems begin to crack under pressure and a new phase begins. Nostradamus wasn't likely pointing to a single doomsday, but rather to a threshold moment when everything set in motion finally reaches full expression, not just politically or economically, but spiritually and culturally, across all levels of human life. This is not just about prophecy or astrology. It's about paying attention to how time moves, how patterns repeat, and how history isn't always linear. It loops, it echoes, and sometimes it warns us before we're ready to listen. So, the question we must ask ourselves isn't, what will happen in August 2025? But rather, what has been building toward this moment all along? Are we prepared for the shift? Are we paying attention to the signs, the patterns, the cycles? Because if Nostradamus was right, then August 2025 is not an end, it's a transition, and that means we still have the power to shape what comes next. The lesson here is not to fear the future, but to understand it, to engage with it, and to see the deeper rhythms beneath our fast-moving world. By doing so, we give ourselves a chance not only to endure change, but to grow through it. If you've watched this far, you're clearly someone who senses that August 2025 holds deeper meaning. Comment below with "I see the signs" to affirm that you're tuned in to the messages hidden in time. Don't click away, yet there's still more to uncover about what Nostradamus may have truly foreseen. Stay with us until the end to connect the final pieces of the puzzle. Number 4. Signs of collapse, quatrains, and modern parallels. If August 2025 truly marks the culmination of a 26-year countdown, then we should expect to see the signs of unraveling all around us, and we do. Wars, pandemics, environmental catastrophe, technological disruption, global mistrust. But Nostradamus did not see these events as random. In his quatrains, they emerge like milestones on a predetermined path, flashing warnings as we move closer to the edge of transformation. Let's explore the most telling signs and the eerie verses that seem to have foreseen them. 1. War, plague, famine, and fire. When you read quatrain 46 of Century 2 from Nostradamus, "After great trouble for humanity, a greater one is prepared. The great mover renews the ages. Rain, blood, milk, famine, steel, and plague. In the heavens, fire seen dragging a long spark." It feels less like an abstract verse from the 1500s and more like a haunting summary of the world we're living in now. Every phrase seems to echo something real, something recent. Let's break it down together. The line, "After great trouble for humanity, a greater one is prepared," suggests that the global pandemic, as devastating as it was, may only have been the beginning, not a conclusion, but an opening act. Think about what we've been through since 2020. COVID-19 disrupted economies, overwhelmed health systems, and left long-lasting scars across society. But if this verse is right, that disruption might only be the precursor to something deeper, possibly not just more suffering, but a period of necessary transformation. The next line, "The great mover renews the ages," has been interpreted by many as a reference to a powerful force, perhaps celestial or spiritual, initiating a shift so large that it resets the course of human history. Then we come to the haunting imagery. Rain, blood, milk, famine, which many believe points to climate extremes like floods, failed harvests, polluted resources, and widespread hunger caused by disrupted agriculture and supply chains. Steel and plague could symbolize the constant threat of war and the ongoing spread of disease, not only literal pandemics, but also the psychological and economic aftermaths they leave behind. And then we reach perhaps the most cryptic line, "In the heavens, fire seen dragging a long spark." Some view this as a poetic description of a solar flare or other cosmic event, something from the skies that disrupts power grids, communication systems, or weather patterns, reminding us how fragile our modern life really is. What ties it all together is this underlying message, that we are in a moment of deep transition where challenges, though frightening, may also serve to break down outdated systems and push us into a new era. Nostradamus doesn't just list calamities to alarm us. He's pointing to a pattern of human evolution that often begins with hardship but ends with renewal. So the real question becomes, are we looking at the end of something or the difficult beginning of something that must change for the better? If this is the great shift he foresaw, then perhaps our role now is not to fear what's coming, but to prepare our hearts, minds, and communities to move through it with clarity and courage. 2. The Sun in Leo, a time of eruption. Quatrain 83 of Century 9 reads, "The sun in 20 degrees of Leo shall burn. The great flame will rise from the center of the earth. Noise, war, and death shall be heard in the west. The silence broken where peace once lay." These words from Nostradamus strike with unsettling clarity, especially as we step into mid-August 2025, when the sun reaches 20 degrees of Leo, astrologically landing around August 12th to 14th. Leo is a fire sign, associated with boldness, heat, and transformative energy, and in this verse, it seems to signal a powerful eruption. But what exactly is erupting? Could it be the Earth itself, a literal volcanic explosion or seismic shift? Or could it point to something more symbolic, like a societal rupture or spiritual awakening that shakes the foundations we've come to rely on? When Nostradamus writes of a great flame from the center of the earth, some interpret this as natural disaster, while others see it as representing the eruption of long-repressed anger, truth, or transformation from within humanity itself. And when he says, "Noise, war, and death shall be heard in the West," it raises sobering questions. Are we looking at geopolitical instability, civil unrest, or the collapse of systems we once thought unshakable? What's perhaps most haunting is the final line, "The silence broken where peace once lay," which feels less like a distant warning and more like a reflection of what many are already sensing: a growing tension, a subtle unraveling of calm. Have you noticed how quiet stability is no longer something we take for granted? This quatrain doesn't just predict destruction, it marks a moment of irreversible change. It hints that August may be a threshold we cross unknowingly, only to look back and realize everything split in two. So, how do we respond to such a powerful moment? Do we resist the change or prepare ourselves to move through it with awareness and intention? The deeper lesson here is not to fear eruption, but to understand what it reveals: truths that can no longer be buried, systems that can no longer hold, and the opportunity to rebuild on stronger, wiser ground. In times of disruption, we can either collapse or grow. And this August may be the invitation to choose growth individually and collectively. If you've watched up to this point, you're already feeling the weight and the potential of what August 2025 might bring. Whether it's a literal eruption or a symbolic awakening, something powerful is stirring. Comment below with "I'm ready for the shift" if you sense that change is coming and you want to meet it with awareness, not fear. Let's start a conversation. What do you think the great flame truly represents? My take: it's the burning away of illusions so that something more truthful can finally rise. 3. The breaking of Western alliances. Quatrain 15 of Century 8 from Nostradamus reads, "Great discord shall arise among the three brothers, their pact broken by hidden tongues and silver. Blood shall flow not by blade but by betrayal, and the third shall fall while the others smile." Many who study these words believe the three brothers represent the long-standing alliance between the United States, the United Kingdom, and France nations, bound not just by treaties like NATO, but by a shared belief in democratic ideals and a history of standing together in global conflicts. Yet today, as we approach August 2025, the signs of quiet fracture are becoming harder to ignore. In the background of major headlines, there are shifts happening: muted exits from collective defense promises, under-the-table economic and energy deals, and carefully worded speeches that mask growing suspicion. As the verse warns, this isn't about open war between friends. It's about betrayal dressed as diplomacy, trust slowly corroded by competing interests, and decisions made not in the light of cooperation, but in the shadow of self-interest. Ask yourself this: what happens when old friendships no longer serve new ambitions? Can alliances hold when each partner begins to act more like a rival than a brother? In Buddhism, there's a saying, "Three things cannot be long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth." This quatrain seems to suggest that the truth about global unity, especially in the West, is being tested. Nostradamus speaks not of swords, but of silver, pointing to influence bought, loyalties sold, and agreements undermined by quiet betrayal. In a world where so much depends on international cooperation, whether in climate action, digital security, or peacekeeping, this silent unraveling could reshape the global order without a single shot being fired. So, what can we learn from this? Perhaps the deeper message is that the strength of any bond, whether between countries or individuals, is not measured by the words spoken in public, but by the values upheld in private. And as we move closer to this potential turning point, we're reminded of the Buddha's wisdom. The thought manifests as the word manifests as the deed develops into habit, and habit hardens into character. If betrayal begins in thought, then healing must begin there too. What kind of character will nations and each of us choose to build now? 4. The rise of a silent third power. Quatrain 78 of Century 5 reads, "The two powers will weaken, the third will grow. Quiet as the dawn, without trumpet or flame. Its tongue is unknown, but its reach shall show. And kings shall bow, though no war is named." This verse from Nostradamus offers one of the most intriguing glimpses into the shifting global landscape we now find ourselves in, especially as we approach August 2025. It suggests that while the world's attention has long been focused on the two dominant powers, often interpreted as the United States and its Western allies on one side, and Russia or similar traditional adversaries on the other, there is something else rising, something quieter but perhaps even more transformative. Many believe this third power is a reference to the silent but strategic rise of China, not through military conquest or dramatic declarations, but through global infrastructure projects, digital surveillance systems, supply chain dominance, and long-term economic influence that stretches into every continent. However, a growing number of analysts see an even more abstract force behind this prophecy, not a country at all, but a kind of borderless power made up of tech giants, artificial intelligence, and decentralized digital platforms. These systems don't wear uniforms, wave flags, or attend global summits, but their presence is already being felt in how we communicate, how we shop, how we think, and increasingly, how nations govern and respond. Could this be the power Nostradamus foresaw? A force that speaks no one language but reaches everyone, that wins not through war but through dependency and data. He writes that kings shall bow, though no war is named, suggesting that influence today is more about control through convenience, loyalty through algorithms, and obedience born not of fear, but of habit. So ask yourself, in a world where traditional power structures are slowly fading and digital systems quietly shape the choices of billions, who really holds the power? The lesson here is not only to recognize this shift, but to remain conscious and discerning in how we interact with the forces around us. As the Buddha taught, all that we are is the result of what we have thought. And in an age where thoughts are being shaped by unseen hands, it is more important than ever to stay awake not just to what is happening, but to who is quietly rising behind the curtain. Five. The false world of illusion. Quatrain 40 of Century 1 reads, "The false world will shine with silver lies, the old king dethroned, the jester now wise. What was beneath shall rise. and men shall trade their freedom for a mirror's guise. These lines from Nostradamus may feel like ancient poetry, but if you take a moment to reflect, you might see just how closely they mirror the world we live in today. When he speaks of silver lies, many interpret this as a warning about the digital illusions that now shape so much of our lives: shiny, high-resolution screens, filtered realities, curated content, and algorithms that sell us a version of truth customized to our preferences, not based on facts. Doesn't that sound familiar? What we consume online often tells us not what is true, but what will keep us clicking. And when the verse says, "The jester now wise," we might ask ourselves, have entertainers, influencers, or AI voices become more trusted than scholars, scientists, or spiritual guides? Has the fool become the teacher, while the old sources of wisdom are pushed aside or ignored? The line, "Men shall trade their freedom for a mirror's guise," hits particularly hard, suggesting a future, maybe even a present, where people willingly exchange privacy, independence, and authenticity for the ability to perform a carefully constructed identity online. If we're constantly reflecting who we think we should be, rather than being who we truly are, what are we actually becoming? This quatrain doesn't predict an external disaster, it warns of an internal one, a subtle erosion of reality itself. So the question is, are we living in a time where we're more connected than ever, yet increasingly disconnected from what's real? As the Buddha once said, all conditioned things are like dreams, illusions, bubbles, or shadows. They are like dew and lightning, thus should they be perceived. That teaching reminds us to be mindful of what we take as real and to be awake to the difference between surface and substance. The lesson here is not to fear technology or reject progress, but to look deeply, ask questions, and make sure we are not losing ourselves in reflections of who we are supposed to be. In a world of silver lies, clarity becomes a rare and powerful form of freedom. Will you choose to seek it? 6. The splitting of consciousness. Quatrain 66 of Century 6 reads, "The veils shall fall not by force, but by fatigue. Those who see shall not be seen. The many will drink from poisoned wells, and a few shall walk a path unseen." Unlike the other verses we've explored, this one doesn't point to war, politics, or natural disasters. It points inward, to a subtle but powerful transformation of human consciousness. When Nostradamus says, "The veils shall fall not by force, but by fatigue," it speaks to something many of us may already feel, a kind of emotional and spiritual exhaustion from the endless flood of noise, screens, opinions, and distractions. It's not that truth is hidden violently, it's that people become too tired to search for it. And then he writes, "Those who see shall not be seen," suggesting that those who begin to awaken, those who start to ask deeper questions and step back from the crowd, won't stand in the spotlight. They won't be loud, but they will be present. Now consider the haunting phrase, "The many will drink from poisoned wells." Could this be a warning about the effects of modern information sources, endless scrolling, clickbait news, algorithm-fed narratives, or even AI-crafted realities that feed our attention but starve our awareness? These poisoned wells keep us engaged but not enlightened, entertained but not empowered. And yet, Nostradamus says, "A few shall walk a path unseen." It's a powerful image, quiet individuals stepping outside of the noise, reclaiming their clarity, their peace, and their ability to see the world as it really is. So I ask you, which path are you walking? Are you caught in the current of distraction, or are you stepping into stillness? The real message here is not about fear, but about choice. The splitting of consciousness doesn't mean chaos for all. It means an opportunity for some to rise above confusion, to unplug from illusion, and to reconnect with their true awareness. As the Buddha once taught, just as a candle cannot burn without fire, Men cannot live without a spiritual life. This verse reminds us that even in a noisy, fatigued and fractured world, the quiet path still exists unseen, but always available to those who are ready to walk it. If you're still watching, then you're likely one of the few who senses that something deeper is happening beneath the surface of everyday life. Nostradamus's words aren't just prophecy, they're a mirror. Comment below with, "I choose the quiet path," if you're beginning to step away from distraction and return to your inner truth. What does that path look like for you? For me, it means less noise, more presence, and remembering that clarity often comes in silence. 7. Collapse beneath our feet. Quatrain 3 of Century 3 reads, "In the month the lion weeps, the earth will shake. Mountains split not by gods, but by wires. Fire underground will find new paths, and power shall fail where kings once lived." At first glance, this verse feels poetic, but when read through the lens of our modern world, its meaning becomes hauntingly relevant. The month the lion weeps clearly points to August, when the sun moves through the astrological sign of Leo, already a recurring marker in other quatrains, and now appearing again as a time of deep disruption. But it's the line, "Mountains split not by gods, but by wires," that invites serious reflection. Could Nostradamus have been referring to the invisible web of technology that now holds our civilization together, fiber optic cables, electrical grids, and data lines buried beneath the surface, running silently through mountains and oceans alike? If so, then fire underground could easily be interpreted as overheating data centers, underground energy explosions, or the surge of electromagnetic forces disrupting systems at their core. This all leads to the sobering line, "Power shall fail where kings once lived," which may point directly to capital cities and major industrial hubs suddenly thrust into darkness, unable to function. The science behind this is no longer abstract. Experts are already warning of an increase in solar activity during the 2025 solar maximum and a strong coronal mass ejection, CME, like the one recorded in 1859, could fry satellites, knock out communications, and cause widespread blackouts across continents within minutes. Back then, society was less dependent on electricity. Today, even a short disruption could trigger economic paralysis, panic, and systemic breakdown. And while Nostradamus may not have understood solar physics, it's possible he foresaw the consequences of a world so deeply reliant on fragile systems that it only takes one cosmic spark to bring everything to a halt. So the question now is, how prepared are we, not just technologically, but mentally and spiritually, for a sudden collapse of the systems we take for granted? This quatrain reminds us that modern power is not invincible, and that resilience will not come from resisting change, but from embracing clarity, simplicity, and the ability to adapt when the ground beneath our feet begins to shake. Number 5. August as a pattern of collapse. When we take a step back from the cryptic language of prophecy and look directly at the flow of history, a compelling pattern starts to appear, one that doesn't rely on superstition, but on undeniable precedent. August, time and time again, has proven itself to be more than just another page on the calendar. It becomes a threshold, a hinge month where the world doesn't gradually shift but suddenly tilts. Whether you believe in astrology or not, whether you're drawn to spiritual symbolism or grounded in historical fact, there's no denying that August has played host to some of the most dramatic and world-altering events of the modern era. Think about it. In August 1914, World War I began, ripping apart empires and introducing the world to industrialized, mechanized warfare. In August 1945, Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bombed, bringing an end to World War II, but introducing a new era of nuclear fear and Cold War strategy. In August 1990, the Gulf War began, and a new kind of televised high-tech conflict shaped how we viewed war itself. Fast forward to August 2008, when the Russo-Georgian War erupted, while financial markets began to crack, foreshadowing the global economic crash that followed weeks later. And more recently, August 2021 saw the chaotic US withdrawal from Afghanistan, leading to the Taliban's sudden return to power and a reassessment of Western military influence across the globe. These aren't isolated footnotes. They are turning points, moments when the global order was either shaken or reshaped entirely. So we have to ask, is August simply coincidental in all of this, or is it part of a deeper rhythm we haven't fully understood? Astrologically, August is governed by Leo, a sign tied to fire, power, ego, and transformation. Ancient cultures saw this period as a time of reckoning, a moment when things come to light and are burned away to make room for something new. Nostradamus, who was deeply trained in astrology, may have picked up on this exact cycle. When he references quatrains like Quatrain 83 of Century 9, "The sun in 20 degrees of Leo shall burn," he might not be speaking only in metaphor. He could be pointing to this very time of year as a cosmic pressure point, when external and internal forces converge to shake the status quo. And now, as we approach August 2025, many are noticing that same sense of tension building again. We're not just watching isolated events, we're watching convergences, economic stress, climate extremes, political instability, digital disruption, and cultural fragmentation. History has taught us that what starts in August often unfolds over months and years, like ripples turning into tidal waves. That's what makes Nostradamus's work so eerie, not because he names specific disasters, but because he points to the when, not just the what. So the real question is, are we paying attention to the timing of these shifts, or are we brushing them off as coincidence? If August has always been the month when silence breaks and foundations move, then perhaps we're standing on a threshold once again. The deeper lesson here is that awareness of timing can be as important as awareness of events. History doesn't just repeat, it pulses, and maybe August is the heartbeat that warns us change is coming. What will you do with that awareness? Will you brace for collapse or prepare for transformation? The choice, as always, rests in how clearly we choose to see. Number 6. The rise of the silent generation. Not every revolution roars through the streets with banners and bullets. Some unfold silently, in the stillness of inner awakening. As we move deeper into 2025, with the world strained by ecological breakdown, rising polarization, digital manipulation, and a profound loss of shared moral compass, a different kind of movement is quietly taking shape. You may not see it in the news or trending on social media, but it's there, growing in silence, formed not by privilege, but by pressure. Nostradamus, in his more mystical writings and personal letters, hinted that humanity would one day face a split in perception, a fork in the path of consciousness. One road would lead toward deeper control, fear, and illusion. The other toward clarity, resilience, and truth born from within. Many believe that this is the exact moment he foresaw. In one of his lesser-known verses, he writes, "From ashes, those born of smoke and silence shall rise, their eyes older than their years. They will walk in broken lands and build not with stone, but with thought." This isn't a reference to any one generation by age, but to a generation of awareness, a group of people across the globe, regardless of age or background, who are beginning to see through the illusions of the modern world and are quietly choosing to live differently. They are not loud. They don't seek followers. They are the thinkers, the healers, the quiet builders who carry clarity like a torch through the fog. They are rising, not to conquer the failing systems, but to move beyond them, rejecting divisive narratives, artificial values, and the shallow distractions of a world that feels increasingly hollow. Instead of asking how to fix the old, they ask what new seeds can be planted in its place. As the Buddha once taught, do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. That's exactly what these individuals are doing, acting not from panic, but from presence. Their tools aren't weapons, but questions. They ask, what matters most when systems collapse? What kind of world do we want to co-create? How do we rebuild, not in conflict, but in consciousness? If August 2025 truly marks the culmination of a global cycle, one hinted at not only in prophecy, but echoed in patterns of history and behavior, then what lies ahead may not be destruction, but redefinition. The silent generation rising now isn't here to fight for the old world. They're here to reimagine what it means to be human, not by resisting with anger, but by living with wisdom, not by making noise, but by embodying clarity. So ask yourself, are you clinging to a collapsing narrative or quietly stepping into a new one? In a time when confusion is loud, perhaps the real revolution is silence. And in that silence, truth begins. As we step further into August 2025, the question is no longer if change is coming, but whether we're willing to meet it with open eyes and steady hearts. Nostradamus may have written in symbols, but the patterns are becoming clear. This isn't about fear, it's about awakening. Thank you for walking this path with us. If this message resonated with you, please like the video, share it with others who may be seeking clarity, and subscribe to the Journey of Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming explorations into prophecy, history, and conscious transformation. Until next time, stay awake, stay present, and stay wise.